to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, July 15th, 2015, halfway through the month, hump day, middle of the weekday. We have got lots and lots of stuff to talk about today, all kinds of things happening all over the globe. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick program note, tomorrow in our second hour of the show, we're going to have Joshua Cook joining us, talking about these various trade agreements, Trans-Pacific Partnership, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, and all that is wrong with them, and they are. It's basically a return to British mercantilism across the globe, where you don't have a choice where you will buy your products from anymore. You will be ordered by your government to buy your products from the favored companies, just like the American colonies were having to deal with up until the time of the Revolution. Now then, obviously, big news today continues to be the uproar over the reaching of an agreement with the P5+1 and Iran. And the backlash is continuing. I'm looking at a good example over in The Guardian in Great Britain. Republicans hate the Iran nuclear deal because it means we won't bomb Iran. Remember when John McCain used to hop around saying bomb, 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 bomb Iran, and then he'd laugh, he'd giggle insanely. And, of course, we already have the leading contenders. Well, they think they're leading. That may be changing. We'll be talking about that later on. But the leading lights of the GOP candidates for the presidency, Jeb Bush and Lindsey Graham are out there just screaming that this was a giveaway and, you know, this idea that we should work for peace is nonsense. We've got all the bombs. We should just go ahead and kill everybody and let God sort them out. And, of course, my response to all of these warmongers, and yours as well, ought to be, okay, if you really feel that way about it, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. We ran out of the desert camo, but here's your bright day-glow orange jumpsuit left over from the CIA's torture centers. Watch your head climbing into that transport aircraft, and we'll call Tehran and tell them you are on your way to kick their butts all by yourself. But we, the people, remember the lies about stolen incubators that tricked us into the first invasion of Iraq. We, the people, remember the lies about Saddam's nuclear weapons that tricked us into the second invasion of Iraq. We, the people, remember how little over a year ago, Obama and Kerry were trying to trick us into an invasion of Syria with more lies about poison gas. We, the people, remember how there weren't really torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, there wasn't a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, but there really were weapons on board the Lusitania. In short, we the people remember all the lies, frauds, and deceptions used to trick us into wars of conquest, to send our young people out to die in wars created out of thin air by and for the money junkies. I think we need a new rule in America, that those who want war are the first ones on those front lines. People like Jeb Bush and Lindsey Graham are all splendidly brave with the lives of other people's children. It's time to see the true measure of their courage and commitment to war by saying, you go first. Lindsey Graham is all over the corporate media, was on Fox News before whining about the Iran deal and, oh, it's just terrible, it's this, it's that. And they're trying as hard as they can. And from the fury that I am seeing from some of these people, like Lindsey Graham and Dick Cheney and Jeb Bush, I am starting to get a sense that they do not have a veto-proof majority in Congress ready to vote down this Iran deal. I think everybody's a little fed up of all this nonsense. Former Vice President Dick Cheney was out there saying, you know, what's the president thinking? No, we should go out and bomb them. That's what we've got. We've got all the bombs and weapons. We should just solve everything by bombing. I tell Dick, here's your rifle, but he could turn around and shoot his lawyer friend again. So I think it's best if we keep guns out of his hand. Rand Paul is out there saying he opposes the Iran deal. Why? Well, because Israel doesn't like it. Israel doesn't like it. And they have got the propagandists out there just rocking and rolling on this. I saw this article over in the Army Times, no less, okay, where back during the surge in Iraq, under the Bush administration, there were a lot of U.S. soldiers who died from these improvised explosive devices, and at the time they said they appear to be home-built. They're just building them in their garages, and, the blueprints are easy. It's actually easy to build these things, is the reality. But all of a sudden, just in time to argue against the Iran deal, Senator Tom Cotton, an Arkansas Republican, has come out with a new report saying that, oh, yes, we know Iran was building all these improvised explosive devices and smuggling them across the border into Iraq. We absolutely know that Iran is to blame for at least 500 U.S. troop deaths in Iraq. So they've functionally declared war on us, and we ought to declare war on them. They're really getting desperate out there. Now, Iran's foreign minister Zarif is out there saying that Netanyahu is angry because this Iran deal ended a manufactured crisis, and he's absolutely right. All this hue and cry about Iran's nuclear threat is a creation of Israel and Israel's whores in the U.S. government and the U.S. corporate media, who have been screaming that Iran is just 6 months away from a nuclear bomb since the 1980s. Israel needs Iran for the same reason the United States back in the 1950s needed the Soviet Union. And that's what's going on here right now. Just like the loss of the Soviet Union meant the loss of control by fear over the American people, if Iran is tamped down and everything's going to be peaceful, the people of Israel are going to stop worrying about Iran and start worrying about all the things going wrong inside their country. Netanyahu is furious because he didn't get the war against Iran he wants fought by American sons and daughters. And Netanyahu is scared because with this manufactured phony crisis about Iran coming to an end, he's got nothing left with which to distract from discussions about Israel's endless war crimes against their neighbors, in particular the Gazans, or from Israel's very real nuclear arsenal, which is still a topic that is very obviously off limits to the American media. We're going to grab a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Hey, is Dick Cheney allowed to leave the country with a gun? Is he a war criminal?
Well, I don't know, but, he certainly has lousy aim.
These people are just, I don't know, just toss them down into the ocean somewhere. Like Linda Graham and, all these other...
You mean Lindsay?
Well, yeah, I know from what I hear, it's Linda. But, hey, Mike, they are all tied to the military-industrial complex. All those generals, screaming that Russia's the next, the biggest threat. Notice, last 2 years ago, they wasn't a big threat. It's just they're the flavor of the month.
No. What happened with Russia? Russia was our buddy. We were doing business with Russia. Russia was part of the global financial community. And then Putin took government control of their central bank. And in less than 48 hours, Russia went from being good friend and ally of the United States to the top of the special high-interest targets list. That's what started it.
Too bad they can't do anything about it, though.
No, well, they could if they're willing to exercise the nuclear option, and I'm concerned it might actually wind up there.
Mike, this whole Iranian thing, I still don't trust Obama. And after him trying to get into Syria and, using ISIS, and I just feel there's something else at work.
Well, actually, I'm not a big fan of Obama, but when we come back from this commercial break, I'll tell you what I think is going on with what Obama is thinking. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And let me tell you what I think is going on here. And it amazes me that all these people who are out there on Israel's payroll to say war with Iran, war is great, war is fun, we're going to have a really good time as long as it's other people's children being killed and crippled on this whole thing, don't seem to be seeing the larger picture, okay? Now, Obama is not caving in to Iran or anyone else, okay? Obama's goal with the Iran deal, as it was with normalizing relations with Cuba, is to prevent more nations from pivoting to Russia and China. As they are pivoting faster than the U.S. can invade and conquer them. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Obama, but I think we need to recognize that he is finally, in the last years of his term in office, starting to think more like a statesman and less like a politician. And that's what's going on here. Obama understands the American military is stretched to the point of breaking. We can't invade and conquer Iran quickly. Certainly not quickly enough to forestall Russia and China coming in on Iran's side. And so this P5+1 deal is to try and encourage Iran back to the Western sphere of influence, which Iran is predisposed to do. These nations that flip over to Russia and China do so only because they don't feel they've been left any choice. And that's what's going on. Obama's not doing this to make the Iranian people happy. He didn't normalize relations with Cuba to make the Cuban people happy. In fact, the Federal Reserve is already telling the Cuban people, you're on your own for your debt. We're not helping you out here. This is all about trying to preserve what remains of the Western sphere of influence against the rising economic power of Russia and China. That's what's going on here. And all of these people like Lindsey Graham and Dick Cheney and Rand Paul, who are in the pay of Israel, are out there screaming war, 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 and not understanding that if a war starts with Iran, the U.S. is going to get stuck in yet another quagmire. It's going to drive yet another nation with major resources out of the U.S. sphere of influence and over to Russia. That's what's going on here. Now, over in Great Britain, I think they're getting fed up with all this nonsense as well, because their Foreign Secretary, Philip Hammond, is out there saying Netanyahu clearly wants a standoff with Iran to continue. He doesn't want any kind of a deal, because Israel needs an enemy Iran to scare its own people into obedience, just like the U.S. government used the Soviet Union for back in the 1950s and 1960s. So they could wag commie at us, and we were brainwashed to wet ourselves and say, please, Mr. Government, save me from the evil communists. Take my money, take my children, start a war. I don't care. I'm just absolutely terrorized. Israel needs the image of an enemy Iran to rule their own people through fear, to extort more money from the U.S. taxpayer, which he's going to get, and, of course, to continue to distract the world from Israel's own war crimes and nuclear arsenal. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. John in Barbados. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yeah, I go along a certain way with this deal with Iran, but I think Obama's done this purely for political expediency.
Why? He's not running for office again. He can't run for office again. You know, his career in public life is coming over. He's thinking about his legacy, you know, and he wants something that he's going to look good in the history books for.
Well, I think it's worse than that, because I wouldn't trust the U.S. to honor a treaty or an agreement, not 1 inch.
Unfortunately, I'm in agreement there because of all the treaties they have violated, including the obligations of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty with Iran.
Yep. Well, I mean, if I was Iran, I would take this. We know what reason he's done it, to try and drive a wedge between Iran and Russia, but I just wouldn't take it. If I was Iran, if I was the leader, I'd be doubling down on building military equipment, because I know the invasion from America will be coming shortly.
Well, if the invasion will originally come from Israel, then Iran will retaliate, and then the U.S. will step in. They've already announced they're going to do that. And, Iran still has every right to build conventional weapon systems or buy them from Russia or accept them as foreign aid from Russia and China. And I think that's the reason why this war with Iran that everybody wants, because that's what Israel wants, it's doomed to fail. It's going to turn into another quagmire like Iraq or Libya or Yemen, and we're already mired down all across the globe. We're stuck and can't get out. And, again, I'm not a fan of Obama, but I recognize and have to give him credit for that he's starting to take the wide view of what's going on and not just go out there with a knee-jerk yes, sir, to his financial backers and supporters. Very clearly, he has taken a stand against members of his own party, not to mention the GOP as a whole, and and Israel as well. And he's going to have to mend bridges because Israel's already saying, well, we're going to mess things up for your entire party next election unless you go on out and kill Iranians for us. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more in the show.
Yeah. Well, I want to cover another subject. What I've been reading between the lines, that Tsipras of Greece was threatened. And what I want to point out
it's not between the lines. Bloomberg is reporting that yes, they were threatened. Okay.
Well, all I can say is when Britain votes to leave the Euro and the European Union next year, Germany should keep its mouth firmly shut because we do have nuclear weapons, and that's our guarantee. And we've had enough of Germany from 1939 to 45. So Merkel should shut the hell up.
Well, Merkel's in trouble because of this Iran deal, and of course, from the point of view, from the Greek deal. Everybody's saying, "Oh, great, the Germans are back in Greece." It's just like 1944 all over again. So, she's in trouble on this situation as well. They pushed for too much, went too far, and the fact is, both sides on this thing are starting to fall apart. We're going to be talking about that as soon as we finish with Iran and Israel and the rest of it, okay? Got about 15 seconds.
It looks like the Greek parliament is falling apart over this deal, and it doesn't look as though it's going to stand.
Well, we're waiting. I mean, it's almost midnight there in Athens, and I think the parliament is just waiting and hoping that the rioting crowds are going to get tired and go home. Then they can do whatever their vote's going to be and skedaddle out of there with their skins still intact. But we're keeping an eye on that. Got to let you go here, John. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Fox News is in full conditizing mode. They're still going on about that St. Louis police officer who was shot yesterday. Now they're going on about how Scott Walker wants to sue the government over their plan to drug test welfare recipients. How dare you drug test? And it's all fringe issues and nonsense because they don't want to talk about what's going on in the world. Now, I just looked at the live webcam over in front of the Greek Parliament building, and it does look like most of the protesters have now gotten tired and gone home. It's pretty much empty. There's still no vote from the Parliament, which I think tells us they're still arguing it back and forth. So we're going to keep an eye on that and see what happens there, and we're going to keep an eye on that. Also on the New Horizons, NASA is finally starting to release the images from yesterday's Pluto encounter, and that's kind of exciting. Now, getting back to Iran, Defense Secretary Ashton Carter came out with a statement saying that the U.S. may go ahead with the military option against Iran in a bid to pacify Israel. Okay? So even though a deal has been reached, both the United States and Israel, well, Israel actually, the U.S. is being dragged along, are talking about just unilaterally launching a war with Iran in which ultimately young Americans are going to be killed and crippled. Now, Ashton Carter is definitely breaking protocol coming on out with this statement, given the official position of the Obama administration on this. By the way, during Obama's press conference, did you notice the overwhelming majority of the questions coming from the prostitutes and correspondents of the American corporate media was, how will this affect Israel? How will Israel, feel about this? Is Israel under threat? So you know who they're getting their marching orders from. Now, Obama, in an attempt to mend bridges, and remember, Netanyahu blew the bridge up with that grandstanding stunt before the Congress. Obama has sent an offer to Israel to upgrade Israel's military to assuage their fears of Iran attacking them, which is nonsense. Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another country in 200 years, and Israel is a nuclear-armed nation. So it's complete nonsense. Netanyahu apparently is refusing to take the message, take the call, not responding. So Netanyahu is turning this into finding something we can say under FCC rules, a spitting contest, but that only makes him look worse with all this childish behavior, and I think the world is getting sick and tired of that. All right, let's see. Other nations are already chiming in. Lebanon, they think the Iran deal is good. It might settle down their internal politics and get their stalled presidential elections going again. They've been dealing with that. Japan welcomes the Iran nuclear deal. And by the way, we ran an online poll at whatreallyhappened.com. Should Congress approve the Iran deal? 90% said yes. All right, let's grab ourselves some phone calls here. Mark in Texas. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, how's it going? I'm usually Mark from North Carolina, but I'm in Amarillo today.
Okay, well, good for you.
So what I wanted to say is I don't understand these, these neocons and these other warmongers. They make such a big thing about this, and yet they were so gung-ho, and nobody, and a lot of this media said nothing, or almost nothing, about this horrible trade agreement, you know?
I'm sorry, the which agreement? Oh, the trade agreement. Yeah, your phone line's cutting out.
I'm sorry, the fast track?
Yes. Oh, they didn't want to be bothered. They just give the president fast track authority, whatever you want to do to please the corporations, go ahead. We're too busy running for re-election here. They gave not just Obama, but Bush pre-approval to launch wars. Didn't want to be bothered with that. But by golly, if there's a possibility of peace, Congress is going to come on in, and they're going to have their say about it. And there's going to be a fight between the White House and the Congress over this Iran deal. And the only thing Congress can do is kick the United States out of it. And what will happen in that eventuality is all the other members of the P5, no longer +1, are going to make their own deal with Iran. And it'll be the U.S. cut off from Iranian oil exports. It'll be the U.S. cut off from Iranian markets. Iran's going to be off there securing peace through commerce. And they may still wind up pivoting toward Russia because the U.S. backs out of the agreement.
Yeah, the other thing I remember, I think they're going to go towards Russia anyway, because Russia seems very happy with the deal. So, I was watching RT earlier, so they seem very pleased with it, so it's hard to say. But as far as Israel goes, I don't understand, because when the Iraq thing started, Israel was then, and I think Netanyahu, I believe at that time, was in charge, and they were cheering the United States on to go to war with Iraq at the time and saying what a threat Iraq was.
Oh, yeah, Netanyahu, we put the video up yesterday where Netanyahu's out there saying Iraq's got nuclear weapons, Iraq is a danger, Iraq is just, and he made the claim back then, if you deal with Iraq, peace will come to the Middle East. And so the U.S. went in and destroyed Iraq twice. Now in the middle of the third time, the Middle East is still a mess, and we've got Netanyahu back here crying, nuclear wolf, Iran, nuclear wolf, or nuclear duck, actually, in Netanyahu's case.
But the fact of the matter is, this actually could work out good for regular people, because this could bring down the price of oil even more than it is already. Oil started spiking again, and now it's coming down, and hopefully it'll come down a heck of a lot more. I'd like to see it go below $1 a gallon again. It would be great.
Well, on a personal level, I agree with you. The problem is when you have that widely used a commodity, changing its price too dramatically either direction, it's going to have repercussions. As the oil prices came down, we saw oil exploration companies close their doors. We saw companies that supply materials to oil exploration delivery companies had to close their doors and go out of business. Yes, we'd all like to see lower gasoline prices, but we could unfortunately severely damage our own energy infrastructure if they come down too fast. And that's just a reality we have to be aware of.
Well, I got a question for you then, as far as that goes, because when it comes to fracking, I'm kind of have mixed feelings. Now, here in Texas, I know there's a lot of fracking going on and all that, and it's a big industry. But do you really think, I'm not an environmental wacko. I don't go with the global warming nonsense and all that. But do you really think it's a good thing for the environment, for the water supply and all that?
No, I don't. I'm absolutely unequivocal on this. Fracking is bad. It was a lame idea. It was never going to work. It is poisoning, contaminating the environment. It's killing off the fish. It's releasing dangerous carcinogenic chemicals. It is triggering earthquakes. And, of course, behind it all, it is failing utterly to produce the volume of usable gas and petroleum that they were claiming that it would. It's a big, huge failure, and the U.S. put pedal to the metal on fracking in order to be able to weather the war they were planning in the Mideast, which would cut us off from those oil resources. It's the same reason they went ahead with all this deep drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, knowing that the current technology can't really handle those intense high pressures.
So maybe this is a blessing in disguise. The fact that now we may be getting more oil from Iran. And I have my doubts that Iran is really the bad guys they're making them out to be.
They're not the bad guys. They're no more the bad guys than Saddam Hussein was, or the Libyans were, or the Yemen. What's going on with Iran is this is the U.S. throwing a childish tantrum because back in 1979, the Iranian people kicked out their U.S. puppet ruler, the Shah, who'd been put into Iran in 1953 when the CIA overthrew the elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh. You cannot talk about what's going on in Iran without going back to 1953 and starting there. Mark, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're going to go right back to the phones here. We're going to talk with Errol in the Netherlands. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Hello, Mike. Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha. And I've been thinking, I saw the Greece situation. I'm from the Netherlands with Dijsselbloem, the minister here that has been gone back 2 years from now. He can do his business again. My question is to all the world, why don't we can get along with each other,
Most people can. Most people
No.
can. It's the sociopath, money junkie, power-mad freaks who can't get along with each other, and they drag the rest of the world down with them. That's basically what's going on here. It is the curse of political power that it attracts the very sort of people who should never be allowed to have it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm now, my age is around 40 years old.
No, you whippersnapper, you.
But I think, personally, really, what I'm going to say now, we are blessed with the Internet, that people can get direct information from the net, and they want to boycott that also, but that is impossible because it's a new era. It's a new
it's a whole new world. It's a whole new paradigm. And again, I like to draw a parallel between the social transformation that happened when Gutenberg rediscovered movable type printing and books became affordable to the middle class and literacy exploded. And there were some institutions that were able to adapt and evolved to the reality of a better educated, more informed populace that was not as easy to lie to, and those institutions are still around. Other institutions couldn't adapt to that new reality. They went away. We're seeing exactly the same thing going on with the age of the Internet. A lot of the draconian attempts to try and reverse the effects of the Internet mirror those that were done to try and reverse the effects of easily available, inexpensive books. They're ultimately doomed to fail. And, we're seeing the beginning of a whole new age. And the only governments and companies that are going to be able to survive and prosper in the future are those that are going to have to adjust to the fact that they can't just lie to the people all the time about everything that's going on. Okay?
I just want to close that down. I want to say to you, that is what most people don't yet understand, what the Internet is, and it goes much further than we have realized. And I must say one thing, this is just the beginning of a new age for humanity.
I certainly hope so.
Humanity and all the things that we can go through all the things you see now in science fiction movies, with just what we have last. What was it? NASA just get to Pluto.
To Pluto, yeah, that was very exciting.
Yeah, exactly. But this is just the beginning, and in a later stage, maybe 200 or 300 years from now, maybe they are listening to this, what I'm saying now. But I want to say one thing. This, exactly at this moment, also with everything what we are seeing now, the age of the internet and the connection with everybody around the world. So we have cables, cables, satellites and everything. This is the full communication of a reality, so we can go further and not destroy ourselves, because that is a very dangerous thing, to destroy ourselves. We need to realize that we need to go further than destroy ourselves.
Well, the people who are into destruction, are into destruction because they can make money off of it. Blow something up and sell you a new one. Loan you money for weapons, so forth and so on. What we're seeing here, though, right now, the Internet, the global Internet. All right, thank you very much. Bye. We're going to let you go. The global Internet represents the purest expression of the principles of democracy in history, where every citizen has an equal voice to get out there. Now, obviously, the money junkies and the power freaks are trying to figure out some way to reverse that and turn the Internet into just another TV channel with a lot more buttons and dials on it, which, by the way, if you're a Time Warner customer, really doesn't work all that well. But ultimately, all of history can be written as an ongoing contest between rulers trying to keep their populations ignorant and naive and trusting, and technological breakthroughs which upset that balance between the knowledge of the masses versus the will of the political rulers. And, they're very much afraid. They want to go back to the world of the 1950s and 1960s, where the leader would tell the media what to tell the public would have no choice but to believe it, and they'd be off and having fun with wars and all the rest of that stuff. Those days really are gone. And we're seeing a backlash. They're trying to figure out some way they can take that away without making it obvious that's exactly what they're trying to do. Take away our right to talk to each other, unfettered, without observation, in order to turn us back into loyal little viewers of the corporate TV news media. All right. Still no word from Athens about the Greek vote. We're keeping a very, very close watch on that one. The longer it goes, the more and more it looks to me like there is a major debate in the Greek parliament, and it's not a slam dunk. They're going to vote that through. We're going to be talking about that more in hour number 2. But to finish up hour number 1, yesterday we were talking about this Russian politician who'd done a video interview saying that he was fully expecting a U.S. attempt at a coup d'etat against Vladimir Putin. Get rid of them any way they can. Kick up protests, say it's democracy in action, and kick out the legitimate government of the Russian Federation in order to put a U.S. puppet in it. Same thing they did in Kiev January of last year. Didn't work out all that smoothly, but that's exactly what they did. So it doesn't come as a surprise today that Fox News is running a show that ISIS is mounting a jihad in the Caucasus region. Oh, we have to invade Russia now. We're not making war on Putin, just like we're not really making war on Bashar al-Assad, but we have to send in troops and bombers and everything to Russian territory because ISIS is there. So, it's underway. The problem is Putin knows that's what's going on. We all know that's what's going on. And the U.S. really is risking a full-on military confrontation with Russia and or China by continuing to play these games, confrontations that the U.S. is not equipped to win conventionally, and that means the use of nuclear weapons somewhere down the road. Unfortunately, our government has literally bet the farm on this plan to force the world back to Bretton Woods and the petrodollar. They can't turn around and go back. even if they had the mental disposition to say, yeah, we messed this up, let's change course, and we know this government can't do that. Look at Obamacare, what a disaster that was, and they can't reverse course on that. And so we're in a very, very dangerous time here. Now, Israel is down there screaming and dancing and applauding that there was a guilty verdict handed down in the case of this guy who worked at Auschwitz as an accountant. And we've got another Nazi war criminal to wag at you to explain why it's okay for Israel to do what it does to the people of Gaza. 94-year-old guy, he was an accountant, a bookkeeper. He wrote ledgers and stuff. Remember the last one they had? Guy who fed the dogs and made sure the kennels were cleaned. That's how desperate they are to find more Nazis to wag at you, and they have just about run out. What is poor Israel going to do when they run out of Nazis to wag at us to make it okay for them to go in and drop bombs on the children of Gaza? And that's another reason why Netanyahu's in a state of panic here. Alrighty, we're coming up here on our top of the hour news break. When we come back, we're going to go back into this situation in Greece in a lot greater detail. We're keeping an eye out for latest word about the vote from the parliament and the protests in the streets. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and the phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. It is just after midnight, Athens time. Parliament is still in session, still no word of a vote or when one might be expected. But at this point, it may be moot, because on both sides of the deal, it's starting to break down with all this bickering and argument, and everybody's saying this can't work anyway. Now, in Athens, there has been rioting, there's been the use of Molotov cocktails, tear gas, it's already turning violent in the streets. Now, as I mentioned to one of the callers, starting yesterday, everybody was saying, why did Tsipras cave? Why did Tsipras cave? He just completely betrayed the Greek people. Ooh, bad Tsipras, bad Tsipras. And it turns out, basically, he was threatened by the money junkies, literally with an invasion of his country if he didn't go along with them. And that is not without historical precedent, because when the United States Congress refused to renew the charter for the first bank of the United States in 1811, the Rothschilds literally threatened the U.S. government, if you do not renew our charter, you will find yourself in a war. Congress stood firm, and the War of 1812 was the result. This is how the money junkies play. And Bloomberg is now reporting that the Greek Prime Minister was saying basically there was a knife at his neck. Do it our way or else. They're not acting like economists or bankers or politicians. They're acting like the mafia, which maybe it's all the same thing anyway. Now, up in Germany, Merkel is in serious trouble because she basically was out there leading the charge that, we're going to force Greece to abide by the government, the agreement that we set up. We don't have to repay them the money that we owe from World War II. And she was hanging on to her support in Greece on the idea that the deal was going to be done and it was going to work out. Then the International Monetary Fund came out with their own report saying this can't work. What is in this deal can't work, and they're basically saying exactly the same thing I was saying. All this money is going to pour into Greece. It's immediately going to flow back out to the banks holding the debt. There isn't going to be anything left in Greece with which to rebuild economy, industry, and jobs. It cannot be made to work. They're saying it could take 30 years for any kind of a positive result to happen in Greece with this plan. They're saying the projections in this plan are unrealistic. Cannot be done. And remember, that's not even admitting to the reality of that 11th marble that we talk about here. Now, over in Great Britain, they're saying they absolutely will not allow any of their money to go into any more bailouts for Greece. So this thing is already falling apart. Now, there have been word that Tsipras might resign if the Greek parliament votes through this austerity package. Now he's already turning around and saying, well, look, a captain does not abandon his ship. He's now indicating he's going to stay and try and keep things together. But he's dealing with dissension in his own Syriza party, who are seeing him as having betrayed the principles they ran on. And if this deal falls apart, if the Greek parliament votes it down, if the IMF is not going to get on board, if Great Britain's not going to get on board, this could fall apart, and we're back to the possibility of a Greek exit of the euro and a pivot toward Russia. Now, there's a very interesting article over in the Telegraph talking about how the harsh terms of this bailout austerity deal are having social repercussions. Europe is beginning to see the European Union as just another version of neo-colonialism running rampant across the globe. Now, this article in the Telegraph is on the side of the money junkie bankers, and they're quoting one of the Syriza parties as saying it's now perfectly clear to a lot of people that the only way out of neo-colonial servitude is to break free of monetary union, which is absolutely right. And then they describe this Syriza politician as a rebel. Okay? So note how in the corporate media, anybody who refuses to live under the blessings of private central banks, they're a rebel. You shouldn't be listening to, they're rebelling against the private central banks, and we can't have that anywhere on earth. Yeah, we can. We should. Remember, banking is not science. Banking is a religion. It's a set of arbitrary rules we are all taught to believe are real in order to give an advantage to the priests of that religion, in this case, the owners of the private central banks. And it only works as long as we continue to allow ourselves to believe that this is the way the world is supposed to be. And we all need to become banking heretics. I don't believe this is the way it's supposed to be. I think the public currency ought to be handled as a public utility. It is the most fundamental aspect. It's the most fundamental function of a government, to have a public currency that is a public utility and not a privatized for-profit operation. Now, over at Global Research, they've got an article, Grexit or Jubilee. That word is now starting to show up all over the place. That maybe the only way out of this is to simply annul the debt. Because that's what Jubilee did in ancient times. Everybody understood back then. Usury destabilized the system and would bring it to the edge of collapse. And every 50 years, there would be a Jubilee where all debts were erased, all slaves were freed, everything was reset to start commerce all over again. And as long as they had Jubilee, things continued. And then finally, as Rome became an empire, and the money junkies said, we don't need Jubilee, everything's just fine. And then, of course, debt eventually crushed the Roman Empire, where foreign enemies could not. Now, the problem, of course, for the money junkies is they can't write off anybody's debt anywhere on the planet without the rest of the planet standing up and saying, hey, we deserve exactly the same thing. And even the Pope is now talking about some kind of a mechanism to simply declare the planet bankrupt, reset everything, and begin again. And remember, all this debt is imaginary. The money that the private central banks claim they are owed does not exist. And it never did. It's all make-believe. And we need to refuse to believe their fairy tales anymore. And that's why the money junkies are so afraid. The illusion is starting to collapse. Alrighty, let's see. Texas has now launched their own state bank backed by the gold that they're trying to get back from the New York Federal Reserve. And this, of course, is a challenge to the Federal Reserve, just like the Bank of North Dakota. And North Dakota is doing very, very well compared to the rest of the country because they have a state bank. And they've been kind of ignored by Wall Street and the corporate media. Okay, yeah, there's a state bank and they're doing good. But the American people don't need to hear about that. It's going to be a lot harder to keep a lid on it when it's happening down in Texas because of the size of Texas, its economic links to the rest of the country, and the fact that Texans, when they do something good, do like to talk about it a lot. So they're getting ready to launch their state bank. They're going to back their currency with gold, not promises of future American slave labor. And there's another very interesting article over here in WashingtonsBlog.com. Well, we got to take a break for commercials. I'm going to come back and talk about this one. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show, and still no word about a vote from the Greek Parliament. Now, getting back to the American economy, there's a very interesting and insightful article over at Washington's blog, and they're talking about the results of the Chicago Booth Kellogg School Financial Trust Index, published yesterday, showing a record low level of trust by Americans in the nation's entire finance system. People do not trust Wall Street. They do not trust the banks. They do not trust the Federal Reserve. They do not trust the government. And that's another reason why those who still have some cash are keeping it in their pocket. And by the way, the retail numbers are in for last month, and retail sales tumbled the most since last February. Now remember, when we had a poor retail season at the start of the year, they were quick to say, oh, it's because of that terribly cold winter that we were in, except that, no, we were not in a terribly cold winter because of human-caused global warming, but people thought we were in a terribly cold winter, and they stayed home and didn't spend their money. Well, now we're in the dead of summer. People still aren't spending their money. What are they going to blame it on? And they're going to blame it on the people. You're not spending enough. This economy would be fine if you just go on out and buy more of the things we're trying to sell you. With what? What are we supposed to take down to the shopping mall? Good intentions? Did you hear about that lady who was making up her own $100 bills because she claimed she read online that Obama had signed a law that we can make our own money? Just like the Federal Reserve. Now remember, when the Federal Reserve does it, it's economic policy. If you do it, it's called counterfeiting, and you will go to jail. Now, Donald Trump is coming on strong. He came in first in the most recent nationwide poll released yesterday. He holds the top spot. That is significant. And everybody's freaking out. He was supposed to be this joke. He was just going to come on in. Everybody was going to make fun of him, and they were going to. They're going to have to let him into the debates now, because he's definitely at the top of the polls all across the country, and he's rattling a lot of cages, and that's good. That's why I'm supporting him, at least through the debates, because he's stirring things up. He's forcing the American candidates to deal with what's really going on in this country, rather than hiding behind all these little fringe issues they're trying to create, like the Confederate flag. Now, Hillary has come out swinging, calling Donald Trump a racist because of his comments about the illegal immigrants. And Trump came right on back, saying that, it's obvious Hillary is trying desperately to hold on to what lead she has over Bernie Sanders, who's also gaining on Hillary, and says Hillary's out there lying because Donald Trump is not knocking immigrants or immigration, and neither am I. If you want to come to this country, there is a legal process to follow, and welcome. I hope it lives up to your expectation. It probably won't, but welcome anyway. The problem is illegal immigration. And Donald Trump made a point of saying Mexico is sending all of these criminals across the border. And we do know that illegal immigrants hold a disproportionate position in the number of arrests for various crimes like drug offenses, auto theft, rape, molestation. We know that a lot of the MS-13 gang members are coming across the border. And Hillary's position is politically incorrect to talk about this. Well, somebody's got to talk about it. This is not make-believe, Hillary. This is the real world. Hillary wants to spin a fantasy make-believe world, and then we'll all vote for her because it's going to be good for feminism and all the rest of it. Now, Donald Trump is correct. Mexico's government is taking advantage of the open borders to the U.S. to dump their worst, unwanted people into our country. And they are not the first to do that. Back in 1980, when the U.S. graciously opened their borders to Cuban refugees who were coming across on these home-built boats and everything, Castro went down to Cuba's prisons, emptied them out, put all those criminals on boats, and sent them north. And Florida's been dealing with a major crime epidemic in their streets ever since. They even made a movie about it. Al Pacino, when he did his remake of Scarface, I think it was on cable here just a couple of weeks ago, was all about that. Yeah, when you open up your borders wide, all the neighboring governments are going to say, great, chance to get rid of all these prison populations that are costing us money. We'll let the Norte Americanos pay for them. Trump is becoming a serious threat to the fantasy-based world of the status quo. He's a threat to the North American Union scheme by pointing out that, no, we're not all equal between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. There are significant economic, cultural, educational differences, and the borders cannot be dropped, even though that's exactly what Obama has tried to do. Now, there's a very interesting article over at the Western Journalism Center. Truth is an existential threat to the U.S. government. We've been talking about that for a long time. A lot of people are out there. I mean, George Orwell, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Viva la revolution. And that's why the political establishment is so scared of Donald Trump, because he's out there telling the very unpleasant truths about what's going on. And this article goes on to say, when you reach a point where the government realizes it can no longer lie with impunity, its next step, inevitably, is to curtail liberty and oppress the people in order to perpetuate its rule. Both parties seem to be in agreement with that, and we're seeing that all across the country. Try and find ways to end our First Amendment right to freedom of expression. Hillary is selling it out to Israel. Free speech zones. They're desperate to find some way to get rid of that pesky Second Amendment. And it is the Second Amendment because it's important. It's not just a coincidence. It's right up there at the top of the list. Now, at a press conference that Hillary held the other day, one of the reporters asked her about reinstating Glass-Steagall, which was the law that was put into place following the Depression of the 1930s that prevented depositor banks and private investment banks from being in each other's business. And that law was overturned to save Citigroup, which Travelers and Citicorp had merged, and that was a violation of Glass-Steagall. And instead of holding Wall Street to the letter of the law, they quickly passed this Graham Leach, I'm forgetting the third name on that act, which basically repealed Glass-Steagall. And that opened the door to all this monumental fraud with other people's money we've been seeing. Hillary ignored the question at her press conference, but her campaign has now said Hillary Clinton would oppose the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall on Wall Street. We can't put limits on those Wall Street bankers. That would be silly. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, this nonsense over the Confederate flag is spinning totally out of control. I think the politically correct movement is realizing that they've pretty much destroyed their own credibility on this one. But it is out of control. Up on CTV, Canadian television, they had a story coming out of Ottawa that apparently at this festival, they spotted somebody walking around in shorts with the Confederate flag design on them. Now remember, that design was never officially the flag of the Confederate States of America. It was briefly used as a naval ensign. Hollywood said, it looks cool, it's easy to make. Props can make this for a lot less money than some of the other flag designs. We'll just say this is the flag of the Confederacy. And people believe that's the flag of the Confederacy because they've seen it in Hollywood movies all these years. That's how silly all of this is. So there's a big stink where, oh my goodness, somebody's wearing the Confederate flag at this music festival up in Ottawa. Now, at the time of the United States Civil War, Canada was not yet a federated nation. It was a bunch of little independent territories, plus a big chunk of land that was still being run by the British East India Company. These territories were still under British control, and while the Canadian territories were officially neutral in the Civil War, Britain sided with the Confederacy, out of concern that Lincoln's greenbacks were a threat to the private central bankers of Europe. Now, the ordinary people of Canada were opposed to slavery, which is why Canada became the terminus of the Underground Railroad. But Canada was not allied with the Union, was not in the war, so why are they claiming to be offended by the Confederate flag, other than the United States government and media and politically correct movements say that they ought to be? And one of the things that this Confederate flag nonsense is telling us, there are way too many moral cowards running around this country willing to just go with the flow of what the government says and does and what the media says and does, which, if you will recall the good German phenomenon of the 1940s, proves to be the path of disaster. Because while the Nazis got stuck in that war and dragged the nation to disaster, there were the good Germans who said, if I do what I'm told, if I believe what I'm told, if I don't cause a fuss, nothing bad will happen to me. And, yeah, bad things happen to all the Germans. The same thing's going to happen here, unless people stand up and say, this nation is on a bad course. It's our nation. That's why it says right up at the top of the Constitution, we the people. And ultimately, we bear the ultimate responsibility for directing this nation in a good course towards the future, for peace and prosperity for all, in the face of a political machine that has hijacked our nation, stolen it from us, and is now selling it off to the highest corporate or national bidders. Now, getting on back to this PC movement that's out there, there's a very interesting story, and it was over in the socialmemo.org. It's about a guy named Greg Elliott, who got into an online Twitter discussion with two feminists up in Toronto, Steph Guthrie and Heather Riley. Now, this all started 3 years ago. Now, Elliott did not threaten either of these women. It's not claimed that he harassed them in any way. And it all began when Ms. Guthrie tweeted that she wanted to sick the internet on a video game programmer who created a game in which virtual people could punch a feminist. Tacky and tasteless, I will agree with that. But Ms. Guthrie then went on to contact employers in the city, telling them not to hire this programmer, Greg Elliott. And Ms. Guthrie went out and said, we want hatred on the internet to destroy his real life. Ms. Guthrie then went and filed charges against Elliott, claiming she was in fear for her safety and her life, even though it's documented that these two feminists, Guthrie and Riley, literally organized meetings of friends to plan how to wreck Elliott's life. Now, have you ever noticed that when someone expresses their honest opinion to the PC crowd, it is called oppression? And when the PC crowd organizes to wreck the life of the commenter in retaliation, it's called feminist empowerment. We saw that back in the 1990s. It's completely one-sided. It's unethical. And one of the big problems with the PC crowd, and we're all seeing it, is they truly believe the ends justify the means. We can go on out and destroy somebody's life as long as it achieves our political gain. That's what the KKK was saying when they were lynching the black people. Now, over in Baltimore, which continues to be a nexus of this attempt to fan up a race war in this country, there was this group, Safe Streets, that was funded by tax money, was supposed to be an anti-violence group that recruited former criminals released from prison to basically create a program to go on out and say this is not a good thing to be doing. It's supposed to be an anti-violence group, taxpayer funded. Based on evidence from a robbery investigation, the police raided the offices of this Safe Streets program and found guns and illegal drugs in the place. Good program there. All funded by the taxpayer here. Now, down in Alabama, a teenager is suing the police because they tased him 3 times while he was having a medical seizure. The lawsuit says the mother, responding to an emergency call, showed up in her pajamas, and the police tased her too. Down in Georgia, the police shot an unarmed woman in the head, bragged about their marksmanship, and then prevented first aid responders from reaching her. To date this year so far, there have been 500 people shot and killed by police that they acknowledge. Could be even more than that. Police are killing more people than ISIS are in this country. Up in New York, a police officer there has been arrested on federal drug charges for selling oxycodone to a drug dealer in Vermont for 3 years. It took him 3 years to catch up with this guy. All right, we're going to, we're going to hold off on this call till after the commercial break here. I'm going to talk a little bit about this immigration thing that's going on here. In the so-called sanctuary cities, there is a massive crime wave going on. 7,500 new charges, including rape and child sex assault. And apparently, more than 1,000 of the illegals facing these criminal charges are still free on the streets. They're not locking them up. Now, when we come on back, we're going to be talking about Department of Homeland Security Chief Jay Johnson, because he's made a couple of very bizarre statements that we need to examine very, very closely. And there's been a new late development on this whole issue of the sanctuary city that we're going to be talking about when we come on back from this next commercial break. Plus, we got a phone call waiting on the line I'm going to get to. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go back to the phones here, now, Department of Homeland Security Chief Jay Johnson basically came out making the statement that sanctuary cities are beyond federal control. Okay? And he's basically saying Congress can't pass laws forcing cooperation with federal law on the cities, saying it will conflict with the Constitution. That's what he's saying. So basically, Jay Johnson is saying that cities are no longer obligated to recognize or enforce federal laws, which presumably would include gun control, or laws banning GMO labels or banning various flags, forcing telecommunications companies to provide snooping backdoors, mandating vaccines, or any unfunded mandate for that matter. Or even the recent Supreme Court decision on gay marriage. That's what Jay Johnson just said. Under the Constitution, Congress cannot impose its will on the cities. He actually went out there and said that. Now, Jay Johnson was asked about Kate Steinle. Turns out, didn't recognize the name, was even only marginally aware that somebody had been shot by an illegal in San Francisco. The guy's clueless and out of touch here. But let's take him at his word. Federal laws do not apply inside our city limits anymore. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Freedom breaks free. And we know the federal government's attitude is you will obey our federal laws here. The House apparently just voted to cut funding to all cities that refuse to enforce federal immigration laws inside their borders, primarily resulting from this horrible shooting in San Francisco. Now, the Senate, we presume, will vote a similar measure. The big question is, will Obama veto it as being an affront to his immigration amnesty policy? And by the way, the Census Bureau is predicting that we will see 1.25 million new illegal immigrants coming into the United States by the end of this year. That's their estimate. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Damien in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you been?
Fine.
Yeah, all right. I just wanted to say, I'll be really brief. Well, first of all, this thing with this woman and the whole thing, I love when stuff like this is exposed with people, this overly obsessive PC mentality. I despise it, to be honest. I can't stand it. I can understand being politically correct in the regard of being respectful to people and everything. I mean, that should be a given to any normal person. But
anybody who's engaged in politics, mutual respect and fairness is the first thing they get rid of. Their attitude is always, my agenda must win at whatever cost it takes. Look over at the global warming hysterics who are now out there screaming that climate deniers ought to be thrown in jail, their funding destroyed, their careers wrecked, their tenure revoked. Next they'll be calling for us to be burned at the stake.
Yeah. The only thing I just wanted to say today was I think it's overlooked the importance of not only the control that the banks have in terms of the financial aspects of it, but the control of either instability or stability. They're able to destabilize a country, a people, a nation, a group of people at their whim, pretty much. And I think that's an important factor that gets overlooked, that it's not just the financial aspect, it's that control basically of
they can start wars.
Constitutional rights.
They can and have started wars. They've imposed dictatorships. They decide what business gets started, what business does not. They do exert a tremendous amount of control over these nations that are now enslaved to them. And that is why when the United States was started, the Founding Fathers did a lot of truly revolutionary things. It wasn't just the revolution of kicking out the British. They dumped the idea of a privately owned central bank in favor of a public currency, handles a public utility. They said there's going to be no state-sanctioned religion in order to guarantee religious liberty for all. They really did set up a really good system. But this system the Founding Fathers set up was a threat to the church. It was a threat to the private central bankers, and they have been working for the last 2.5 centuries plus to undo everything that was created by the Founding Fathers, and they've come dangerously close to succeeding.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Bernie Sanders is the only one that I hear that's talking openly about all of these issues, like in the way that our opinions are in line with. The only thing that I have a problem with is.
Hello? I think we just lost our phone connection. Bernie Sanders is saying a lot of things. We just put up a video about him, however, when he was at a town hall meeting, and one of the people at the town hall meeting questioned him about support for Israel. Okay, we just lost our net connection. Okay, let's see what's going on. All right, we are still broadcasting to BAM user, so the connection seems to be over at GCN's neck of the woods, as it were. And don't you just love living in a third world fascist dictatorship where nothing works? And yeah, we seem to have lost.
You're connected on our end just fine.
I'm connected on your end. Okay, I can't get into the stack. The Comrex stack has gone down.
That's probably a shockwave on our end. I'll look into it.
All right, go ahead. So you're still hearing me? I'm glad I didn't use profanity here.
We definitely hear your voice.
All right, because, even though our government may be torturing innocent Iraqis to death to find weapons of mass destruction that never existed and showering white-hot flaming death on innocent people around the world, we're not allowed to say bad words on the radio to prove that we are a just and moral people. All right, so getting on back to the stories and getting around all these little technical issues that we're dealing with, there's a story over in the Daily Bell about the feds crying wolf again over the July 4th holiday, and maybe the goal was just to get us not thinking about independence and why we have a holiday on that day. But once again, they came out screaming, ISIS is coming, ISIS is coming, ISIS is coming. Nothing happened. And now more than a week later, the FBI is saying, oh, yes, trust us, we deterred them. We scared them away from committing terror attacks, and we arrested 10 people, but we can't tell you who they are or why they were arrested or anything about that. It would give away all of our methods and secrets, and frankly, that they took so long to come on out and say, oh, yeah, we really did our job, undermines their credibility. And not having learned anything from all of these past situations, we have a new cry wolf out there. Apparently, the U.S. government intelligence agencies are certain ISIS is going to try and behead the Statue of Liberty. Now, the last time there was talk about an attack on the Statue of Liberty, it came from this website called revolutionmuslim.org, which was actually run out of Brooklyn by a guy named Joseph Cohen. And it featured a graphic of a hatchet in the back of the Statue of Liberty. So this is an image the hoaxsters like to use. And apparently the idea is they're going to go on up and they're going to plant explosives and they're going to blow the head off the Statue of Liberty. And again, the fact that they're blowing up something that is symbolic and not actually critical to the nation tells you it's a false flag. It's another false flag. They're trying to find something they can get traction so you will hate the people you're told to hate. And they're going to get the red-blooded Americans angry by attacking Lady Liberty herself and rip the toga off of her and shame her like they did the lady in Game of Thrones for the season finale. Now, something about ISIS and war that you need to be aware of. There's been a leaked document revealing that nearly one-third of the 847,000 veterans currently in the backlog for health care from the Veterans Administration have already died. They died of their war-created injuries and conditions before the VA even looked at them. Do you realize the VA has a higher kill rate of American service people than ISIS and Al-Qaeda do? And that is shameful. That is absolutely shameful. Got to take a break for our news, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and it's hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And did you hear in the SRN news break where Janet Yellen's out there saying, oh, everything's fine, the economy's great, it's growing here. And yet if you go and actually hunt down the actual numbers on the various financial media websites, they're not good. We reported earlier in the show, retail has had its biggest slump since February. But they're out there just with this, it's all good, don't be angry with us. Be angry with Iran, be angry with Russia, be angry with China. I mean, the lies are coming thick and fast, and they're not even very clever or convincing any longer. All right, I want to talk about what's going on with New Horizons. We're starting to get the first of the images, and I got to tell you, for somebody who has been connected with the space program, I love astronomy. I think in another reality, I would have been very happy as a high school science teacher. This has been exciting to watch this all come down, because I'm old enough to where my life basically spans the history of space exploration to date. I was like 5 when Sputnik went up. And I had the honor of actually being involved in much of this very early on in my life. And I remember being at JPL and watching the images coming in from Lunar Orbiter. I mean, I was a kid at a time when we did not know what the backside of the moon looked like. And where a large segment of the population were perfectly open to the idea that there was an advanced civilization living on Mars because of the reports of canals that were seen through telescopes. That was the world I was a kid in. It was just out there. And then, of course, Mariner flies by Mars, and it's all craters, and he says, oh, well, I guess the canals were just the result of too much fatigue on the brain in those late-night observation sessions here. But it's been very exciting to see Voyager go on out to Jupiter and Saturn and now Pluto. And this is it. The solar system, the preliminary mapping of the solar system has been completed. And it really is a milestone. And, of course, tomorrow is the anniversary of the launch of Apollo 11. And the 20th will be the anniversary of the landing of Apollo 11. It's also the anniversary of the landing of Viking 1 on Mars. And by the way, that's not a coincidence. I'll tell you the story on the 20th about how that all came about, along with the story of Gilbert Levin and the labeled release experiment and how we actually did find indigenous life on Mars. And for political reasons, they said, well, we're just going to say we're not really sure, just like they keep saying about Israel's nuclear weapons. But it is historic, and it's going to take almost a year for all the data from New Horizons to download back to Earth, because it is so far away, and the radio signal is so weak, they can only support a data transmission rate of 1 kilobit per second. That's 125 bytes. Now, if you're as old as I am, and you remember those acoustically coupled modems where you would take the telephone handset and put it in the two big rubber cups, it's about 3 times as fast as that was. That's what it is. And so all the data that it has gathered over the last several hours of the Close Encounter is going to take about a year to come down. And it is very interesting that Pluto does not seem to show signs of asteroid meteor impact, which may change a lot of people's mind about where the Kuiper Belt really begins and whether the crater-scarred inner solar system really is the result of whatever it was that used to live where the asteroid belt is now. Velikovsky may yet be proven right. I've come to understand after all these years that a lot of what is considered science is merely fashion and public acclaim, like human-caused global warming or the Big Bang Theory, both of which I have serious problems with. So, congratulations to the New Horizons crew, and in all the brouhaha, or actually all the celebration about the encounter with Pluto, let us not forget that we're also seeing a lot of interesting information from the Dawn orbiter, which is orbiting the planetoid Ceres, and it's getting closer and closer to those mysterious white spots. And everybody starts, what are they? Are they ice? And they're starting to say, doesn't really look like ice, could be salt. They're still not sure. I wish their little online survey, what do you think it is, let you fill in something, because my response is it's evidence of Gene Roddenberry's Great Bird of the Galaxy, which it does look like, but that's just humor. And, of course, we're looking at Rosetta and Philae. Philae has reawakened as the comet gets closer to the sun and may actually be in a more advantageous position watching the comet heat up and begin to outgas than it would have been had it stayed at its original landing site. So it's all working very well. Now let's get on to the world of computers, and in particular computer scams. We were talking yesterday about how there are these bogus phone calls hitting all across America involving area code 809 and a couple of others, where they leave a message saying, you must call back to collect a prize, you must call back because I saw you in the bar last night and I think you're really hot, or you must call back because I'm calling on behalf of your friend who listed you as an emergency contact. Basically, whatever they can to get you to pick up the phone and dial it, because if you dial these numbers, they go to companies outside the United States of America which are able to put charges onto your phone bill as a payment for services received. Now, this was all originally set up for information-on-demand services, most of which were online phone sex services, where you dial and you'd talk to somebody and you get an extra $100 tacked onto your phone bill. But somebody realized it's actually going to make them a lot more money to not bother with having the hot girls to talk to and just trick people into dialing the lines, and it's running rampant. Now, there was another scam that created a fake Bloomberg News website. The website copied exactly Bloomberg News and apparently used a URL that could be reached with just one letter off from Bloomberg. It was spammed all over social media, and the idea was this is the source of the story, that Twitter was being acquired for $31 billion, possibly by Google. And, of course, Twitter stock just exploded upward. And so now they're figuring that this was a classic pump and dump. Somebody bought a huge amount of Twitter stock. They set up this fake website to put out the story that Twitter is being acquired by Google. The stock explodes upward. The scammers sell out, make a huge amount of money, millions and millions of dollars, instantaneously. and dumped the losses on everybody when Twitter stocks came crashing back down when it turned out the story was fake. And we do see a lot of this going on. Here is my question, listening to this scam. Where was the National Security Agency? Don't they know who really set up this website? Can't they find the cyber criminals behind this scam? Can't they find who it was who bought all the Twitter stock and then dumped it all, conveniently timed? Or was it the NSA doing this? Or somebody on Wall Street? And that's why the records just, it's not there. Remember what happened after 9/11. Just before the aircraft plowed into the World Trade Towers, somebody executed millions of dollars of trades against the American Express company. The money just flowed out of the World Trade Towers to who knows where. And when the buildings came crashing down, they said, oh, the records are lost. The money's gone. We don't know where it went. Then there was this company in Europe that said, we can recover the data from the disks. We have a brand new patented process using lasers. It doesn't matter how bad the disks are damaged. We'll find out where that money went. And they started the recovery. Then somebody came in, bought the company, and the project was put on a shelf, and that was the last we heard of it. And thus is how Wall Street makes those billions of dollars for their CEOs. We've got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still trying to see what's going on with the Greek Parliament. I'm seeing one report right now that informal polling among the parliamentarians is showing that no is in the lead right now. So apparently there's a great deal of arm twisting and pleading and begging and bribing and whatever else is going on. But unless there's a significant change, it looks like the Greek Parliament may vote this deal down. And again, it's moot because the deal is already imploding from the other side, from Great Britain, from the IMF, from Germany. Now, earlier in the week, we were talking about how Firefox had put a block on the Shockwave plugin because of more security holes found in it that have not been patched. And bowing to pressure from we don't know where, could be Adobe itself, Firefox has now enabled Shockwave on their browser one more time. But that's not the end of it, because tech experts are saying it's time for this to go. Because its original purpose, which was to provide high-speed graphics over low-bandwidth connections, is gone. And it is a major pain to use. It is endlessly vulnerable to hacking. And if you are like me, it doesn't matter which browser you're using, you're always getting the message, the Shockwave player has crashed. Press this button to send in a crash report. And you'll send in the crash report. Nothing gets done. I think the American culture needs to stop this idea that we must go on worshiping and supporting products that don't work. Whether it's Adobe Flash, General Motors cars, Obamacare. And say, I'm going to be politically incorrect here and say, certain things are not working in this country and it's time for a change. Alrighty, moving on here. As you know, there has been a big fallout from the NSA spy scandal. Partly from revelations that the NSA has backdoored all of our computers at the hardware level, where we cannot get in and dig out the NSA key for ourselves. Remember, when the NSA key became known, immediately we came out with ways to patch the Windows encryption library to break the NSA's key. Well, now it's in the hardware. You can't get into the hardware. And between that and growing economic sanctions, China decided, well, we're just going to start making our own chips. Now, China has one of the world's most powerful supercomputers, the Tianhe 2 supercomputer, which was ranked #1 on the biannual list of the top 500 most powerful computers in the world. It's getting an upgrade. And due to all the trade restrictions and awareness of NSA backdoors, they're not going to be buying any more of the Xeon Phi cores. They're building their own. They've set up their own large-scale integrated circuit chip factory. They're going to be making their own chips from now on. So those of you who work in the chip manufacturing industry here, those of you over at Xeon, the reason you're all losing your jobs is the National Security Agency. But it's a small price to pay to protect us from criminals and terrorists, which, as we already proved on this website, the NSA can't actually do. They certainly haven't caught who did the bump and dump on the Twitter stocks, have they? All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Politically incorrect is incorrect. It's incorrect. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Well, I'm going to be politically incorrect and call it incorrect. So there. Deal with it.
Well, very good.
All right.
Very good. All right. Actually, I called about the Statue of Liberty threat, about from ISIS.
Yes.
If you do a search engine, look up on little background noise. Sorry there. If you do a search engine, look up on the Statue of Liberty, there are a great many people who allege that it was originally intended to be a statue of Isis, or Ishtar, Astarte. So ISIS decapitating ISIS would be ISIS mounting a decapitation strike on ISIS.
It's an interesting little piece of history, but whoever's behind this, and we know that ISIS is a manufactured boogeyman by the U.S. and Israel anyway. They're not going to care about that history. They're just seeing it. The Statue of Liberty is an icon to America like the Golden Gate Bridge or the World Trade Towers, and we're just going to blow the head off of it, and that'll get the Americans ready to go after the Muslims. No, it won't. Because if you actually look at the engineering drawings of the Statue of Liberty, it's going to be very easy to put that head right back on again. It's another stunt. They're blowing up a symbol, trying to get us angry so that we'll hate the people the government wants us to hate.
Every apocalyptic sci-fi, or every apocalyptic movie that destroys New York shows the Statue of Liberty.
Oh yeah, you got to do that. I mean, Cloverfield, where the head of the Statue of Liberty comes rolling down the street and everything, and yeah, absolutely.
In Planet of the Apes, it remained intact, and Charlton Heston's piece. I thought that was funny. But.
That's true. That's true. Well, it had to be recognized. It couldn't just be a pile of corroded copper, and they say, oh, this used to be the Statue of Liberty. Yeah, it was iconic, and it was a great moment in the movie.
By the way, ISIS actually stands for Israeli Special Insurgency Services.
Well, there's only so many letters and so many names, and I don't think that Israel would actually do that. I think they were just coming up with a name and didn't realize it matched another acronym. I mean, look at ABC. I mean, that's used all over the place. In America, it's the American Broadcasting Corporation. In Australia, it's the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Here in Hawaii, it's a chain of convenience stores. I mean, there's going to be a lot of overlap. I wouldn't read too much into that.
It was a joke. It was a joke.
Okay.
But by the way, speaking of limited letters, the Chinese need big, powerful processors because their alphabet's so big. That'll
No, China has simplified its alphabet in order to come into the computer age, and there's a much simplified system now that they're all using.
I like a reduced instruction set alphabet.
True. You got to be my age to remember RISC architecture. Okay, anything else?
Take care.
All right,
thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. All right, well, apparently Obama is back on the war path against Americans' gun rights and the Second Amendment, and he's trying to recover from this Charleston church shooting debacle, because it turns out that the corporate media lied to you all when they said the shooter was given the gun as a present. It turned out he walked into a gun store, filled out the paperwork, went through the background check, and got the gun, even though he had a prior criminal record, was on these serious psychological medications, and should have been disqualified. And so what are we getting from the gun control people? Well, that just shows that we needed more money and bigger computers to close these loopholes. Have you noticed it's a common theme in government? Every time they mess up, it's because you're not giving us enough money and power and authority to do what we're supposed to do. That's always the excuse. It's your fault. You're not giving us enough. I don't think so. I think we need to go back to that Second Amendment and just say, let's go back to the Constitution and start over. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're keeping an eye on developments coming out of the Greek Parliament. No official final vote has been held yet, and it looks like the reason is they're not going to get the votes. The latest informal tally coming out of Live Squawk is showing that at least 107 out of the 201 Syriza members are calling for a no in the Greek parliament vote. Tsipras doesn't even have his own party. And these 107 members of the Syriza party have published a declaration condemning Tsipras. Tsipras has responded by saying that he understands the deal is not workable and it is a disaster, but he's saying they have to agree to it because the alternative is going to be utter chaos. And remember, Bloomberg is reporting, confirming, Tsipras was threatened by the European Union money junkies that if he does not go along with the deal, Greece will be invaded, most likely through Turkey. Remember, these money junkies, they'll gladly start a war for your children to die in, rather than let a single penny of their illusion of debt escape from them. And I think Tsipras' goal right now is to just keep everybody in the Greek parliament until they get so tired they say, all right, I'll vote for it. I need to go home and get some sleep. I would not be surprised if we get reports that there are fistfights on the floor of the Greek parliament out of this. So, let's talk about human-caused global warming, another big steaming pile of USDA choice bovine excrement served to you by the United States government, the sweetest-smelling government in the world. Summer temperatures in Greenland have plummeted to record lows. The cold snap in Australia is continuing. They're setting cold temperature records down there. Chile and Argentina are dealing with tons of snow, record-setting winter effects down there. And for those of you living in Boston, that giant pile of snow from last winter finally melted away more than 3 weeks into summer. It's a shame. If it had lasted one more month, it would have qualified as a glacier. Now, the Arctic sea ice extent is continuing at its highest level for summertime since 2005. And there's only a few weeks left in the melt season. Remember how Al Gore was out there saying that summer of last year, the Arctic would be completely ice-free. Did not happen. Now, earlier in the week, we were talking about how Obama is now having Medicare pay doctors to set up meetings with their elderly, chronically ill patients to gently suggest to them that they should maybe consider just going ahead and letting the doctors euthanize them because they're a financial burden on our economic system. And the new model is that if you can no longer work and generate wealth for the money junkies, that you should just be gotten rid of. They really are treating us like livestock here. Well, apparently Obama is now lobbying on doctors to talk to their patients about global warming and what they can do and the need for a carbon tax here. Apparently Obama still believes that people have this very amazing degree of trust and faith and belief in medical practitioners. And he's definitely hoisting on his own petard with that one as well, especially after that doctor in Detroit got sent to prison for 45 years for telling perfectly healthy patients they had cancer so he could sell them radiation and chemotherapy and all this other stuff, permanently harming their lives. And I think most people going into the doctor are going to be saying, all right, maybe you know how to prescribe an aspirin or something for my fever. What the heck do you know about global warming that I don't? But that's how desperate they are, because Obama needs that carbon tax. He's trying to figure out some way he can get you to give him more money to hold off the financial collapse of the United States of America, and it's not going to work for two reasons. One, we don't believe anything this government says anymore. And two, we don't have any more money to give them. The whole private central banking system is set up to take all the wealth of the country and put it in the pockets of the bankers, and nobody ever thought about what they were going to do when they succeeded. And the whole system locked up, which is what's going on right now. Now, there's a very interesting story that's coming out because, as I mentioned earlier in the week, real climate scientists are starting to say, yeah, we're going into a cooling trend. There's no question. And there is a new report out talking about a new model of solar cycles. We've been talking about solar cycles all along. We all learned about the 11-year sunspot cycle and the 22-year magnetic cycle in the sun when we were in science class in high school and college. But there have been growing recognition that there are longer cycles that are taking place, and we don't know much about them because we've only been able to really study the sun scientifically for about 100 years. But they're starting to determine these cycles. A lot of this work has come out of Russia, and they're now recognizing there's an 87-year cycle called the Gleisberg cycle and a 210-year Seuss cycle. And all of the minimums of these cycles, the 11-year, the 87-year, and the 210-year, are all coming together in the next decade. And they're saying there's going to be a major drop in solar output, and yes, we will be in another Maunder minimum and another mini ice age. We've been seeing that coming on the last several winters. And I wonder what all those losers who bought into Al Gore's bovine excrement and now can't admit they were made fools of by a politician with no grounding in science are going to say now. Oh, the sun hates Al Gore. The sun is getting checks from the big oil companies. We always get that one. Listen, if Exxon is willing to send me checks for arguing about climate change, I could use the money, but so far the checks seem to be going to somebody else. And not too surprisingly, we're already seeing corporate media articles out there trying to refute this report on these solar cycles and saying, no, we're not headed into a mini ice age. Michael Mann, remember Mr. Hyde the Decline himself, is out there saying, oh, solar radiation, it's a drop in the bucket. It has absolutely no effect here on Earth. It's all about carbon dioxide and human activity. Which tells us that once Michael Mann is bought, he will stay bought. There's another one over here in ScienceAlert.com that's out there pushing exactly the same thing. Okay, yes, solar output is in decline, but really it's minimal, it's trivial, it has hardly any effect on the climate. Really, if the sun were to go away tonight, permanently, what do you think is going to happen to the Earth? Do you think human activity is going to keep the planet warm and toasty and comfortable? That's the new talking point. Human activity has a much bigger impact than the sun. The sun's nothing there. By the way, talking about the new horizons at Pluto and the age of solar system exploration, it has been recorded by all of these probes on Mars, outer worlds, rest of it. When the sun's activity goes up, they all get warmer. When the sun's activity goes down, they all get colder. That's just what's going on out there. And we're dealing with a bunch of people who want to keep their funding to prove humans are warming the planet, to serve the political agenda that we have to pay carbon taxes, we have to live in converted shipping containers, we have to allow ourselves to be told to live like third world poor people for the sake of poor Mother Earth. From the same people who are dropping depleted uranium and chemical weapons and white phosphorus all over anybody who doesn't agree with them. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're keeping an eye on what's going on over in Athens. It's coming up on 2 o'clock in the morning there. The latest report is that Tsipras is once again making a speech before the Parliament, his final appeal to get a yes vote on this bailout deal with the Eurozone. Tsipras is apparently saying it's a lousy deal. I don't believe in it, but he's saying we don't have any choice. We either do this or bad things will be done to our country. I don't think that's a very convincing argument. Now, according to dailysabah.com, they're saying the measure might pass because while Tsipras has not been able to rally support in his own Syriza party, there are enough pro-banker opposition parties represented in the Greek parliament, they could push it over. I think if Tsipras thought he had a yes vote, they would have voted and gone home long before now. So it's very much up in the air. And I'll tell you this, if the parliament votes yes, that's not the end of it, because there are a lot of very angry people outside parliament, all over Athens, all over Greece, who sent a clear message to the government And if the government will not listen to that message, I think there's going to be some kicking down of doors and some grabbing of politicians by the necktie and a lot of noses shoved into faces saying, do you hear us now? So we'll see how that's going to develop, but as of this moment, still no word on a final decisive vote. Now, there's another scandal brewing over a video that surfaced showing the director, the senior director of medical services of Planned Parenthood Foundation of America, talking about how body parts from aborted fetuses are harvested and sold for scientific research, and that in point of fact the abortions they provide are set up in order to not damage the parts of the babies that are then for sale. And in many cases, how they're doing the abortions mimics the so-called late-term abortion that is illegal, because of awareness that late-term fetuses can, in fact, do feel pain. And so Planned Parenthood, we're here to give women choice and provide options and everything, it turns out they're basically selling bits and pieces of the little babies. And that's angering a lot of people, understandably. And the clamor is so great that there are now calls in Congress that there ought to be an investigation, because it's one thing to be out there saying that you're there to provide safe, healthy abortions to women who forgot to take their birth control pills or didn't want to take them because they didn't want to admit that they were being sinful, wicked, sexy people. And quite another to realize that you're harvesting biological material for sale. Now, CNN and Newsweek and the corporate media are trying to downplay the significance of the video. They're describing it as, well, it's a purported video and it seems to show this. There's nothing purported about it. The video's out there. It's all over the net. And it doesn't seemingly show anything. You can hear this woman, Dr. Deborah Nucatola, talking about the targeted mutilation of fetuses so that the bits and pieces can be preserved for sale to the biotech industries. Now, Russia has come out reasserting its complete ban on all genetically modified seeds. The Deputy Prime Minister Arkady Dvorkovich is saying that the goal is for Russia to have the cleanest food supply in the world. That's their goal. And that's another reason why the West wants to make war on them, because the West's goal is to get everybody using GMO seeds in order to create a monopolistic control over global food production. The whole goal behind GMO was not actually producing more food or safer food. Quite the contrary. GMO yields are lower. GMO food has got health consequences. But the goal is that once farmers are using the GMO seeds, they must go on using them, because it would take 3 years or the complete incineration of a field to get rid of them. And they're always going to have to come back to America to get more of those seeds. And the goal of the GMO technology was to do with seeds what the Federal Reserve did with the U.S. dollar, make the world dependent. And out of that dependency comes slavery. By the way, unlabeled GMO potatoes are now showing up in our supermarkets. And the giveaway, if you look on the package and it says fewer brown spots, fewer black spots, doesn't brown as quickly, claims like that, that's the indicator that you're looking at the GMO product. And you should avoid them. Now, up in Norway, their government has conducted a study on GMO food safety. This was commissioned by the Norwegian government, conducted by a nationally recognized scientific authority on the safety of biotechnologies. And they are reporting that all of the so-called evidence for the safety of GM crops is inadequate. They've uncovered massive amounts of fraud, bad data, bad assumptions, bad methodology. They're saying it doesn't actually stand up to the rigorous principles of scientific method and reproducibility. It's all sales pitches. And because of that, Norway is probably going to be going anti-GMO as well. Now, out in California, where they just passed that law requiring all of these numerous vaccines for school children, they're now moving on to mandate a schedule of vaccinations for all adults. And there would be criminal penalties for those who refuse, including jail time. Now, if the government has to order you to buy a product, you know the product is going to be costly, useless, and probably dangerous. Protectionism is the last refuge of bad businesses. And that's where we are right now. If everybody knew the vaccines were effective and safe, this wouldn't be an issue. And we have a government that's out there desperate to protect the revenues of the big pharmaceutical corporations because they're really generous campaign contributors every election season, and they're very generous advertisers for the corporate media. You've probably noticed we don't actually have any ads at whatreallyhappened.com for the big pharmaceutical corporations. That's not a coincidence. They don't like me very much. Now, there's another story coming out of the Daily Mail. Over there, the girls who have been harmed by the cervical cancer vaccination program are now seeking legal action against the providers of that. They've got 8,200 reports of side effects suffered by young women who are forced to take this HPV cervical cancer vaccination. And by the way, the number of complaints connected to the HPV vaccine is equal to the number of complaints about all other vaccinations put together. These are dangerous products recklessly being sold, and it's all about making money because as a nation sinks further and further into debt, the corporations start abandoning principles of safety and efficacy. It's all about we got to sell, we got to make the stockholders happy, we got to keep the bankers happy, and all of the considerations are subordinate. Predatory banking yields a predatory society, predatory businesses, and that's where we are right now. The vaccine makers want to force you to buy their product. They don't care if it's dangerous or, hey, if it makes you sick, you got to come back and buy more from us. That's the entire mindset that has been brought into being by this predatory banking system we are enslaved to. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow, Thursday, on the Genesis Communication Network. Please call your local talk radio stations. Point them at gcnlive.com. Tell them to please carry our programming. We need to get the truth out because the liars have much more money to play with than we do. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.